arms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive and you don't have to be afraid.
Welcome to the Bassline. Destiny Rezendez is an independent researcher extraordinaire. Her threads are some of the very best on X. She does deep dives, unearths esoteric stories, and makes connections you are likely to have not come across. I am thrilled to welcome back to the Bassline the riveting Destiny Rezendez. How are you today, Destiny?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well, and I'm very excited to have you join us today. Let me make a few shout outs for the Bassline listening audience. Of course, we have the next 5 to 8 Healing Frequency Jam at Rock Mill Fitness. That's 274 Lenox Avenue on Sunday, March 25th. So that's in a few weeks, but I'm letting everybody know in advance so you could plan to be there. Tell some friends. We've had an incredible time in the first 2 jams. Lots of good music and good vibes, and the goal of the whole series is to create an atmosphere where people can have an honest to goodness good time. So we've succeeded in doing that, and we're really excited about it. So the series continues. That's March 25th, Rock Mill Fitness, which is 274 Lenox Avenue, and it starts at 3:30 p.m. So it's an afternoon thing. We don't go too late into the evening. We want to leave people time to get home and ready for Monday morning work and school and all that stuff. But please save that date. Also, of course, subscribe to my Substack. Please check out my latest article called Be Careful Who You Pretend to Be, about the long-term harms of lesser of two evils, in quotes, lesser of two evils voting. And of course, you can check out my music at jeremiahhosea.com. Please buy the theme song for this show, Love's the Highest Truth, or any of the other songs there. Lots of cool independent music to check out. And of course, we want to invite you once again to join the Stop the Shots community on X. I'm hosting spaces every night at 9 p.m. Except for Wednesday nights, we start a little bit later usually because Dr. Judy's book club will go until maybe 9:15 or so. We'll take a 10 or 15 minute break and then usually resume around 9:30. But Stop the Shots. Please join the community. You can request a mic and let your voice be heard. We'd love to hear from you, your experience with the COVID agenda, with the killer vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. We want to grow that community to 1 million strong. So join us on X, Stop the Shots. But let's get right into this discussion here, Destiny. So glad you're joining us. Your research is just totally fascinating. And I'd love to generally ask you, what are you interested in these days? I know your research just takes you here and there and everywhere. So what are some of the things that you're researching right now? What have you been looking into?
Well, currently, I've been doing a deeper dive into the Moderna shot, which is kind of what I've always been looking into ever since finding out that they had the intelligence community help them in creating the Moderna vaccine. And I've kind of stumbled upon something very interesting, that the company that made that vaccine, his name is National Resilience. And prior to that name, it resided under different names, under Ology Bioservices and Nanotherapeutics. But I recently found that Nanotherapeutics only became kind of a company from purchasing different technology from different companies. And one of them is a long-standing bioweapons manufacturer called Exoma. And Baxter was the other company they got technology from. And they're the ones that were behind the 2009 swine flu vaccine, which is very interesting because that one did get pulled from the shelf from dangers after like 53 deaths. I think they pulled that one off the shelf. And that same technology that made that vaccine and that same company became the technology behind Resilience, which made Moderna's vaccine. So this that wasn't that long ago. There was a big mistake. And a lot of people at the time, when the H5N1 had an outbreak, they discovered after the outbreak had subsided that the outbreak's origin was right outside the Baxter laboratories. And so there was a lot of, conspiracy around that did Baxter, in fact, start that that entire pandemic on accident from leaking from their laboratory. And they were never able to prove either way if that was true. But to know that that's the same technology that we utilize to make this Moderna vaccine, it's very questionable why we would even considered allowing this company to have any, you've failed before. Why should we give you a chance to do it again? And we see the injuries with Moderna's vaccine and deaths. And it makes me wonder how much of that technology was actually utilized in this new formulation for COVID. So that's what I've been looking into recently and trying to get heads or tails of how safe that. Obviously it's not safe, but what technology did they use to create this, and where can we see more side effects down the road based on what we saw with H5N1. So it's a lot of information, but that's what I'm looking at currently.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I mean, you bring a bunch of things to mind there. I mean, first of all, the criminal backgrounds of all the three major players, Pfizer, Moderna, which amazingly, Moderna had a criminal record before bringing a product to market, which is like, wow, how do you achieve that? Johnson and Johnson, obviously, with the baby powder scandal. And I always just found that so ironic, basically, that you would go from someone having a scandal with baby powder, of all things, harming women and children, to then, as though that weren't intimate enough, vaccines. You harm people with baby powder. Well, instead of taking you off the market forever, now get inside of the body, not just topical powder.
That's the vaccine my dad took. Well, his first one was a Johnson and Johnson.
Wow. And I've also heard that at different times I've heard claims that all three were the most lethal. It's almost like a musical chairs of who's the most lethal. It's like you're all pretty lethal. There was the new thing that that Pfizer is significantly more dangerous than Moderna, and I'd previously heard, Moderna actually has the biggest payload.
I actually did the data on this. I did a thorough investigation on this. There is a few threads, but there's one in particular I did last January. And it's called, I think it's just like COVID-19 in review or something, the title of it. And I'm really good at VAERS, just like Julie. I'm very good at VAERS. I could do it in my sleep. I've used the VAERS, the vaccine adverse event system. And it's a reporting system. And so I went on there, and at the end of the year, because we started vaccination in the United States, December 14th, 2020 was the first vaccine. And they've been going on since then. But just, we didn't start tracking any instances of reactions. No reactions were reported till January, the next month, a couple weeks after the first doses, we started getting reports. So I go by January when I do a full year. So 2021, from January 21 to January 2022, that's one whole year for me. So when 2023 came around, I wanted to do the full 3-year evaluation. And what I found is that the numbers are skewed for when people say that Pfizer is more dangerous. I know what they mean when they say that, but it's not mathematically and statistically honest. There was more vaccines that were Pfizer by a lot, right. So that, yes, they had more deaths, more injuries, but there was more administered. So it's not technically honest to say they were more dangerous. They're both very dangerous. And for different populations. Men were affected very differently than women. Men died far more with both manufacturers than women, but women suffered far more injuries than men did.
Interesting.
So it makes a lot of sense when you think of the nature of men. Men don't like to go to the hospital. They don't like admitting they're hurt or sick. Women, no problem. Like
he is charged.
Women are usually the ones that set appointments for the men in the household anyways to go get checkups, and that's how it goes. So the women reporting more injuries makes a lot of sense to me. And we know that there's the neurological problems were far higher in women for both Moderna and Pfizer. But men suffered more heart attacks. I think there's a little bit lean towards Pfizer being worse for men. For the cardiac problems, but it's negligible, like the difference there. But there is some differences, but a lot of it comes down to 65% was Pfizer. The remainder was mainly Moderna, and then second to that with the 1% or 2% was Johnson and Johnson. They did not get a lot of coverage in this country, despite being the one vaccine. And that was like the one shot I thought more people would gravitate towards.
Right.
It was alarming that people didn't do that. Yeah. But they went for the 2, 4, 5, 6 dose companies, which is so bizarre. But
But then, of course, like every other lie, one and done was a total lie. It's like, oh, well, now you need a booster. It wasn't really one and done.
yeah.
Go get it. And then they also were trying to suggest, oh, well, it's okay to mix and match. Like
And
it's,
people did. People
yeah,
did do that. My
yeah.
father did that. He had Johnson & Johnson, and then they told him he needed a second shot. So he got, I think, Pfizer, and then the last one he got before he died was Moderna.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And then it's also interesting. I wasn't aware until Dr. Henry Ely brought it to my attention,
Mhm.
which is the fact that apparently Johnson and Johnson pulled their own EUA.
Yeah,
That
they did.
they weren't, it wasn't an external regulatory agency that said, "Oh, we noticed something." It was Johnson and Johnson after this huge production, they backed off.
Yeah.
And they withdrew their product, and there wasn't a lot of discussion around that. They kind of just went quietly into the night. And I don't know what the purpose of that was. I thought maybe they were going to kind of use J&J disproportionately to be sort of the fall guys, like, oh, that was the one that wasn't good, but the others are good. When if you see
Hmm.
these compilations, I mean, I saw it pretty early on, video compilations of the vaccine injured saying, you did this to me, Pfizer, you did this, Moderna, you did this, J&J, you did this, Moderna, you did this, and it was like, it was pretty even to me, seeing a whole
Yeah.
bunch of vaccine injured people, and they were saying Moderna, J&J, Pfizer, J&J, it was equal across the board. So it just seems to me they're all bad.
They're all bad. They're all bad. I've not heard one person be like, thank goodness I got vaccinated. I haven't heard a single, and it's been 5 years. I haven't heard one person say it, not once. Not
Yeah, well,
once.
I've seen a couple people, I have to say, in my challenging people online, I've seen people claim that they're doing great and that they've taken 6 shots. I've never seen anyone say 7 yet, but I say, okay, so you're this huge enthusiast for these injections. You took 6 shots, you're 4 behind schedule. You haven't kept up with the science. But also another amazing category are people who they took the 2 initial shots and the booster, and they didn't take any more boosters. They took 1 booster, but they still maintain their hatred for the so-called anti-vaxxers, and they still are
Yeah.
stalwart for the original narrative. But it's like, you dropped out of the ball game. You quit the class. You're not up to
Yeah,
date.
you're unvaccinated according to the
You're
government.
effectively unvaccinated. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's that amazes me. People who they haven't reflected somewhat, but they kept up with they only went as far as the original narrative and didn't keep up with their boosters, didn't keep up with the science, quote unquote.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about something that I've never heard anyone except you discuss, which is, can you take us into, and I can't believe this is even a thing, the Jeffrey Epstein COVID connection?
Yeah, okay, I can. It's absolutely bizarre, and it's 100% true, and it's alarming because the program that he was involved in is still operational today. And that's the sad part. So back in 2000, I want to say 11 or 12, when Jeffrey Epstein was obviously alive, he was good friends with Bill Gates, and he had traveled with Bill Gates, I believe, to somewhere like Romania or Serbia, or somewhere in the east, and they had met with this young bridge player. It was a bridge championship game, and the bridge player, I forget her name, but she's Anna Kova is her last name. I can't remember her first name. She's a 20. At the time, she was 21, so she was an adult. This wasn't a pedophilia thing. It was just he was cheating essentially. He had introduced Epstein had introduced this young girl to Bill Gates, and they played bridge and they hit it off, and they were flirtatious, and he had arranged for them to have this, tryst. Of course, he's married to Melinda at the time,
Mhm.
but Bill sees this 21-year-old girl is very interested in him, and Jeffrey sets this relationship up. So this allows Epstein to get some blackmail on Bill Gates, and he kind of sits on it for a little bit. Actually, he doesn't say anything about it. It doesn't bother him about it, and for like a year, and then a year passes. It's 2012. And he's like, hey, I really want to get into public health. Could you help me do that? I think that you're the guy who obviously is in public health. At the time, he's thinking about creating CEPI. He hasn't created yet, but he's thinking about it. And he's still working on PATH and everything with the AIDS epidemic. So he has a big in already with public health back in 2012. and Epstein wants in on it, and he wants to start a founders fund for public health, and he wants to get some of the bankers involved. And he's like, Bill, you're the guy who could do this for me. You have all the connections. It would be a shame if your wife heard about what happened with you and that bridge player, isn't it? So he pretty much blackmails him into saying, okay, because he's like, I have a meeting, but I would do better if you were there to represent this effort. So they get a meeting with JP Morgan and Chase Bank, and they push this idea of starting a fund for public health that they could, something similar to CEPI, where we're going to pour a lot of money in here. We're going to get a lot of big names to put money into this, and we're going to get involved in public health. And they, because Bill Gates was there, they agreed to this effort. Like, okay, great. With Gates on board, it can't go wrong. So they start a foundation called the Global Health Investment Fund. And it has a parent company, which is the Global Health Investment Corporation, which is owned by JP Morgan. And the foundation is ran by Bill Gates and was Jeffrey Epstein and JP Morgan Chase. So Jamie Dimon and all these people. And it's interesting because they got sued. JP Morgan did get sued during the Epstein trial and had to fork over $300+ million to the victims for their participation in funding his, shenanigans that was going on in the Virgin Islands. And with the idea that they knew he was a pedophile, he had been convicted, and now he's in this fund, and they hire Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson. They fund all of the companies that made money during COVID were largely funded by the Global Health Investment Fund. And that was Jeffrey Epstein's baby. And so when the Jeffrey Epstein trial comes out 2019 and he dies, they erase all of that from their website. They erase all of it. And but you can still find the very beginning pieces of them working together on this fund that is still active today. Very much still active. They're still funding Pfizer. They're still funding Moderna. They fund J&J. They fund pretty much every major company, Nordic, Bavarian. They do pretty much everybody. And that was only possible through a pedophile who worked with a serial killer, I'll call him that, Bill Gates. And that company still works today. They were part of Operation Warp Speed. That's insane to me. Like that this company that was founded by a pedophile, a prolific one, is part of Operation Warp Speed. And their products are as well. So it's but that's the truth. And when I found that out, I was just like, how of all things could Jeffrey Epstein be tied to COVID? But sure enough, he lives on in medications, it seems. And to think that they give these medications to children too just adds injury to insult, in my opinion. You have a pedophile running this foundation funding medications that are harming children. Like, you think about it, and it's almost unimaginably, but it's true. He's even hurting kids from the grave at this point, and that's really scary.
Wow. Yeah. Intense, very intense. And I'm so glad you uncovered that, because it's a big deal. And I've never heard anyone else mention that.
The first person who mentioned it was Whitney Webb. And
Okay.
she had mentioned it. And I thought that was crazy. So I looked into it. And like Whitney Webb she was right. There was a bizarre connection there. And it's the GHIC, the Global Health Investment.
Let's see here. I would love to ask you about something that seems to be good news, but I don't want to get ahead of myself in terms of this announcement that we're ending gain of function, that RFK is calling an end to gain of function. I mean, I find that curious because for many reasons. What's your take on that? What is this a major accomplishment? What has really been announced here in the past few days?
I should be a more positive person when answering this, but I just know COVID well enough. I know gain of function well enough that I'm coming from a perspective of, okay, what have we seen? There's been a moratorium on this before. Like, this has happened before. We have banned gain of function. This is not new. This happened under Obama. And it did later get revoked, and then they allowed gain of function. So is it solid? Is it gone forever? Probably not. Even if it is gone now for the sake of the order, it's probably not gone forever. So that's point one. I'm not certain of its validity in terms of how long it's going to last. And two, we know what happens last time they did ban it, that they allowed some companies and some entities to continue the work regardless of the moratorium. So I don't have the highest hopes that this is going to do what everyone's hoping, because it didn't do what everyone was hoping last time. In fact, we got COVID during a moratorium last time. So am I certain that this is going to end the debate? No, I think that this is, unfortunately, and I hate to say this because I love Bobby, I love RFK, I love Dr. Bhattacharya, and I know he was a driving force behind this. And of all the people that were up there for the order announcement, Bhattacharya is one I've spoken to many, many times. I consider him a friend. I consider him somebody I trust dearly. And I know he has the people's interest at heart. And I know that he sees this as being a big deal. And I think he means that very well. And I understand it could be a big deal. We do need to stop these biological, labs all over, not just our country, all over the world, causing a lot of tension. It's a lot of the reason we're getting into tiffs with Ukraine and Russia because of our biolabs there. And that's all gain of function. So if we cut that out, we reduce a lot of the strain on America in terms of our enemies hating on us and our responsibilities. That's a good thing. It's a great thing. Do I think that it addresses the COVID problem, the pandemic? No, it does not, because we started off with the same thing and yet we had the pandemic. So I think it is a bone to throw to kind of satisfy us, us COVID researchers and those that are injured, as seeing it as a step forward. It is a step forward. I don't want to take away from the administration. It is the positive thing. I think it should have long been done. I think this should have been done when Fauci was in trial testifying. I think years ago, we should have had this happen. So I am glad it happened. We need it to happen. I don't think it's as meaningful to the vaccine injured as people think it is. It's really, to them, they could kind of care less. They're happy to get some recognition that there were wrongs that need righting, but it doesn't address the larger issue. It doesn't, because they can just like with Fauci saying, this isn't gain of function, right? Well, it's not gain of function if they call it dual use research of concern, and they can call it another acronym that they'll just later say, oh no, it's not gain of function. It's whatever, whatever, whatever. And they'll continue the same dangerous work despite the nomenclature surrounding it. So this just means we have to stop using that word. That's all this really means, is we're not going to utilize this word for this research anymore. That's all it really means. And I would like them to be more honest than that with the policy. I would like for them to actually stop these testing. And I haven't read the actual order yet. So when I read the full thing, I'm going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. I want to look at the language they're using. Do they use gain of function and only gain of function? Do they describe it to which we can utilize the description in other instances that maybe go under DIRC or under a different, acronym? So I'm going to be looking for things like that when I go through it. I'll probably go through it later today, because it's crucial that we know the activity, not the name, is banned. Not just the name gain of function, but the activity that describes it. We need to know that is being banned, not the word usage itself, because that's how they kind of get around these things. And that's how Fauci was able to evade, jail, was by manipulation of language. And that's really what I'm afraid of. But it's not as big a deal to me personally as it might be to other people, because I've seen this play before.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Merrill Nass said gain of function is tantamount to bio warfare, basically.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting that sort of exists supposedly on the medical side, but then there's bio warfare on the other side, right? And in the realm of the military and the conquest to be the most powerful military force in the world, nothing is off limits, it seems. You're always in pursuit of the ultimate weapon, and you're in pursuit of every type of weapon for every type of warfare scenario. So, it's hard to imagine those guys just saying, okay, we're going to take our ball and go home. We're done with the pursuit of being the most powerful,
the best
way of destroying people. It's like, if they could turn you into an atom, they would love to have that weapon. If they could vaporize you or poison
They made
you.
a gay bomb in 1997.
Wow.
They made a gay bomb that was a pheromone-driven biologic that they were to disperse from planes over enemy encampments that would would drive the troops in that encampment impossible to resist each other. And the idea is when the effects would wear off, they would realize what they had done, and it would kill the morale of the troops, and
Right.
they would be able to be easily
What an
defeated.
interesting way of demoralizing your enemy.
It was called the Gay Bomb, and we funded this. The United States Air Force did this project, and they did in fact create one. They said they never deployed it, but that they did in fact create a gay bomb to demoralize
Wow.
troops. Yeah.
You know, it's fun. I hate to bring up this crude joke, but you remind me of a joke I remember a comedian saying when there was more discussion and debate about whether gays should be in the military or not. And this comedian said, well, of course gays should be in the military. It's like, in fact, I think we should take whatever they got and shoot it over to the other side. But yeah.
Exactly.
That was
was
just
the
a joke,
idea, I
guys.
think.
I didn't make that joke. That was just something I remembered. But so yeah, an interesting take on that, and I think it sounds spot on. I want to get into something we were talking about a little bit before we went on air, which is, can you give us a bit of an overview in terms of something that I think really hasn't been examined carefully enough? It just kind of flew right on by, and that's the fate of various world leaders who didn't go along with the narrative, the agenda. There was a few African leaders, president of Haiti, people who met untimely deaths after speaking out against this global agenda in which everyone was on board except for these people who wound up being assassinated. Can you give us a bit of an overview of that?
Yeah, there was 4 that I remember, and I can't remember the 4th one, but for the very first year, I think it was the first year, 2020 through 2021, there was 4 world leaders that were very opposed to COVID. They did not want to buy the vaccines. They did not want the World Bank involved in running any of their lockdown measures. And I know it was Tanzania was one, Burundi was another, and Haiti. And all of their just magically died, in that first year of the pandemic. And all of them were vehemently against using these vaccines or even calling it a pandemic. They were not even going with the nomenclature. If this is a pandemic, they didn't want anyone down there. I remember the one from Tanzania had done a test to prove that everything had COVID. He's like, this is a kiwi, and they test the kiwi, and the kiwi was positive for COVID. And he laughed at it, and he soon died.
And he was actually a medical doctor as well.
Was he really? He was a medical doctor?
Yeah, he was an MD.
That makes him even more credible. There you go.
Yeah.
So he knew what he was talking about. And in Haiti, it was Jovenel Moise, I think was his name. I can't pronounce it correctly, Moise. And we actually, as a country, had a lot to do with his death when we, because it didn't come out till 2023, I think, that they had arrested 2 men that were involved in his assassination in Florida. They were holding him in Florida. And turns out they were, I believe, not CIA, but they were some 3-letter agency that were our men that had completely orchestrated the death of the Haitian president. So you don't hear about it because it makes America look awfully bad. But we say that they were former employees of the government. They didn't work at the time as the government, and they're just rogue. They're rogue people. We'll take care of it. We didn't do that. Ooh, it's really sticky, but we did have people in our country involved in his assassination. And of course, nobody suffered greater from the pandemic than our country. So we had a vested interest in this because we also supplied more countries with more vaccines than anyone else did. So we have a financial interest in keeping that kind of quiet and getting rid of a leader like that. So not to make a presumption, but there is a lot that points to that we, as our country, may have had something to do with silencing these leaders once and for all, if you will, put it that way. So they were all against it. They all cautioned their entire populations that this is nothing. We're not doing this. This is World Health Organization. They were all pulling out if they weren't already. And then they're gone. And everyone else who towed the line is just fine. Macron still has this position. Trump is back in office. And it's like everyone who was initially there, we're here again, and except for the ones that said no. And now they're magically, all of them were quote unquote assassinated, or one, I think one had a heart attack. And very convenient for the narrative that these people passed away, because as we are seeing more and more, finally in 2025, it's amazing to say this, but we're seeing some admission that we weren't correct. These vaccines didn't work, as like we said, we didn't test them for this, that, and the third. And so now we're kind of getting a little bit of validation that we were not crazy the whole time.
Sure.
But we don't hear that from the leaders. We're hearing it from companies, we're hearing it from other figureheads, but we're not hearing it from the leader of the company, like countries. Like Trump still hasn't said anything negative about the vaccine.
Mm-mm.
You know, he hasn't been like, we were wrong, I shouldn't have pushed operation. We haven't heard that. But we are hearing it from lower level, authority figures, other politicians and stuff, but not the top person. And I think a lot of it has to do with the silencing of some of the leaders. I think that they know there's some things you can admit to and some things you can't. And the African leaders are an example of what you can't admit to. And we saw what happens if you do. And so there still is this barrier between the truth and our leaders.
Yeah.
Big barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. Great observation. And yeah, I just have to say, African culture, African civilization, it's been a huge influence to my creative development, my worldview. I went to I went to East Africa, to Kenya, with my mother and father when I was 3. And I kind of almost feel like my imagination was formed there. I came back to, I guess it was kindergarten, and I was telling the kids, I saw elephants and lions, and the teacher said, hey, your son has a heck of an imagination. And it was like, no, this was real.
Yeah.
In Kenya, we saw all this stuff. And those are some of my earliest memories, is from that trip. So
that's awesome.
The beginning of my love of Africa. And I've been to South Africa, I guess, what is it? 1, 2, 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah, I performed. My last gig with Gloria Gaynor was in South Africa.
Cool. That's cool.
Many years ago by now. But I haven't been to West Africa yet, and I want to fix that. And I haven't been to North Africa.
I'm Western African. That's why, I've always wanted to go there. I've got Ivorian. I'm Ivory Coast for the most of my Ivory and Mali. So,
wow.
Yeah, and I would love to go visit that. I would love to see Mali. I heard Mali's beautiful.
Yeah, pretty intense place too, it seems.
I heard it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
But it's the seat of civilization in Africa. They have the largest kingdom. Musa Masa had the huge kingdom and very rich people in biblical times.
Yeah, they say Mansa Musa was the richest man in the world.
Yeah, he changed the gold market, which is so fascinating.
Incredible. But but the thing is, it just strikes me when we talk about the assassination of these leaders. Obviously, we saw the assassination of Gaddafi, which the U.S. sponsored under Clinton as Secretary of State, and Obama as the president. Crimes against humanity. And it's just, if you think about the significance of a presidential assassination in American history, the assassination of JFK, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, it's really outrageous that we sponsor these kind of things. Like, these are events that are so impactful to entire nations. But it's like, if it's not one of our American presidents, it's like, oh, well, it gets less attention than a regular street crime from our perspective in terms of our media organizations. They do not do due diligence about these.
Shinzo Abe.
Significant.
That was another leader who died. Shinzo Abe. He wasn't one of the original 4, but he died just 2 years ago. He was assassinated, Shinzo of Japan. And they were the first people to return our doses of vaccines. They sent us back 300 million doses of Moderna, which was one of the first people we shipped to. And they found metal contamination and biological contamination. They shipped them back. And then shortly after that, Shinzo Abe was assassinated.
Right. So, And then there are people who aren't heads of state who met untimely deaths that I think need to be more thoroughly investigated. Like, for example, Kary Mullis, the inventor of the PCR test.
Very much needed. And Luc Montagnier, too.
Yeah.
He was old, but he was doing well right before he died.
Oh, yeah. He was perfectly lucid and coherent. And then he made some interesting statements, and then he disappeared, basically.
Yeah,
with-
definitely need to investigate Carrie Mullis. That's just it. To me, that one is just, you couldn't tell me that timing. It's 6 months, less than 6 months before COVID starts. I think it was August he died, in August maybe of 2019. I mean, that's a month, a month before Event 201. Like, you 2 months, like, you've got to be kidding me. And he knew the PCR because he invented it. He got a Nobel Prize for it. He knew that you couldn't diagnose with that, and that was the gold standard testing, still is in this country for COVID. And it's he would have never allowed that. He would have never allowed that.
Yeah, it would have been quite a different story if the inventor of that test was denouncing the misusage of his test, which I'm certain he would have. He was outspoken. And if you see the incredible interview
I have, yeah.
with Carrie Mullis being interviewed by actually the founder of the Progressive Radio Network that features this program, The Bassline, Gary Null, who's also been one of my guests. Gary Null interviewed Carrie Mullis in a historic interview many years ago, and in that interview, Mullis says so clearly, Anthony Fauci does not know anything about anything, and I would say that to his
To
face.
his face,
It's
yeah.
a pretty simple quote. He doesn't know anything about anything. I mean, how
Yeah.
startling that the inventor of the PCR test made such a direct statement. And look who
Carrie Mullis
Fauci
was a
has become.
genius.
Yeah,
He was an actual, when you think of scientific genius, I think of people like Carrie Mullis. Like, this is a guy who was able to, like, while tripping on acid, come up with like things that somebody could study 30 years at Johns Hopkins and never figure out. And it was such a simple and useful and a highly utilized thing that he created with PCR. It's so very useful. It's used every day in every laboratory. There's not one laboratory that doesn't use it every day. And he was able to do that on his own terms, and just like not even trying to change the world. He wasn't trying to change the world. He was just that intelligent that it came, like, his mind, as it wanders on its own, was able to see what the need was and find the solution and deliver that in a very simple way. And that, I mean, that's a genius that Fauci could never be. He's just not. That's not even, to me, that's like looking at like I mean, you might as well be the janitor versus the CEO here in terms of intellect. Like, you're not,
yeah,
you can't compare. Fauci can't compare. He hasn't treated a human patient in 45 years. What kind of doctor hasn't seen a live patient in 45 years, except for one that's dead? Like this, you're not even and for Fauci to, he always avoided Mullins, because Mullins tried to debate him publicly many times. And
right.
Fauci would run the other way. He didn't want anything to do with it. He would hide behind Dr. Gallo. They would just, avoid this man as much as possible and push him to the edge of science because of it. Fauci couldn't compete, so all he could do was discredit and push him away. And it's unfortunate, because I would have paid $1 million if I had it to see Fauci go against Mullins. I would pay for that. I'd have popcorn in the front row. I would have loved to see that.
Yeah, the late Carrie Mullis. And also he was a surfer too. So,
I heard that. Yeah.
He was known for being physically fit, and then just very quickly
Of
meets his
pneumonia.
demise from a flu.
Yeah.
I mean, pneumonia.
What?
Okay, right.
Like nobody dies of pneumonia except for AIDS patients, I thought, anymore these days, or the very old. Very, very old and AIDS patients, because of immunocompromised. That's the only time people die of flus or colds, like anymore. But apparently the Nobel Prize winner does. Now we lost 2 critical Nobel Prize people that are involved in COVID in ways that they could never foresee. Of course, Mullins would have never been able to foresee they're going to use his PCR to proliferate an entire pandemic. He had no idea it was going to happen, but it did. And then we find out there's GP140 and GP120 inserts in there, which are HIV. And the HIV guy, he dies. And it's just like Luc Montagnier. And so we lose 2 of the most, they were both dissenting voices too. Both of them would have been completely against this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're gone. And they're Nobel Prize winners that would have been on the side of the people, just evaporated from history now. And it's very unfortunate they left us. Very unfortunate.
Yeah, very, all this stuff needs to be more thoroughly investigated. It reminds me of the tragic case of former Merck employee Brandy Vaughn.
Brandy Vaughn, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and Brandy Vaughn was making videos suggesting she was concerned for her life. She'd come back to her residence and had seen things misplaced, and there was I think a duck, a wooden duck with a broken neck, or they snapped the neck off of her wooden
and put it
duck.
in her backyard, and they just set it there.
Yeah,
And
and she issued these chilling statements that she was concerned for her life, and then she died when she was, you know, a high-level whistleblower saying that basically vaccines are poison and don't vaccinate your kids. So she was
people
saying
should know the Brandy Vaughn story. People should know who this brave woman was, and because she's from the industry. She worked, I think, was it Pfizer? It was one of the larger companies.
Merck.
Was it Merck in France. She was at the headquarters in France, and she had a small child, and then she had moved to the United States with the small child, her child, and of course the rules for vaccination there are far different than they are in the United States for going to kindergarten and such, and so she found out that there's a lot more they demand of her child here than in France, and she was very perplexed about it. She's like, well, in France we don't do this, and she's in the industry, and she's like, well, that's bizarre. I think the kid was like 4 or 5, about the time to start kindergarten. And so she pushed back on it. And then she fell upon that bill, SB like 108 or something. I forget what it is. But it was a mandatory vaccination. They're going to remove the personal belief exemption and remove religion. And she was not for it. And she stood up for it. And the second she started standing up for it, and she has all this internal documentation that can help support her. And she's in a perfect position to really do some damage to this narrative that they're trying to spin, that you need these vaccines, and because she knows you don't. She's from France. Well, she's American, but she was in France, and she fights heavily against it. And next thing you know, she had someone break into her house. She found a ladder outside of her bedroom window, like a ladder where somebody's watching her sleep, like right above her bed. Somebody broke into her house. Somebody was able to find out her security pin, because they had gone in there, bugged her house, listened to the keypad, determined which ones were the correct ones, broke in, used that keypad to disarm her own thing, move her computer. Her dog is home, so she's worried her dog is getting messed with. And then they find this wooden duck in her backyard to say, you're a sitting duck. It wasn't her duck. She's like, I don't know where this duck came from. This is not mine. It's just a decoration. She said, I don't know where this is, but it says it's right in the middle of the backyard patio, and it's like, here, you're a sitting duck, because was the message. And she videotaped all of this. She videotaped the whole thing until her death. 3 weeks before she died was the last video, and she said she was leaving her house. She had a friend coming to check in on the house, and she couldn't stay there anymore. And that was like the last video we saw of poor Brandy Vaughn. And I actually pulled up. I was very moved by her story. And I went and I checked, as researchers do. I wanted documentation on her death. So I found her, the sheriff's report from that day when they found her. And I read the report and her coroner report. It very much needs investigation. They found her alone. Well, not alone. They found her with her son. Her son was had gone into the bathroom where she had passed away. I don't even think they claimed what it was, other than like just abrupt abnormal death, a heart attack or something. They just called it on something happens too quickly, too soon to know. There's no marks, there's no bludgeons. There was nothing that they could discern said that she was killed. The boy was too young to verbalize clearly if anything had happened. And there was just them in the house. That was it. And she's found dead alone in her bathroom. No signs of a struggle, no sign of a break-in. But there wouldn't be. They knew her security pin. They knew, I think somebody was probably lying in wait for her, probably in the bathroom. It's very easy to hide behind some shower curtains and just wait till someone's in there. And how the manner of death appeared, like if I was the coroner, I would have been looking for a very small, she was a Caucasian woman, so much easier to find this on her, a small red pinprick anywhere on her body. I would look for near the arteries first, a small red pinprick, because there's plenty of things you could do to inject somebody with something that leaves no trace that would kill them. You can just inject air, water, lots of things that you would not suspect could actually kill you. But if you inject them, it will kill you quite quickly. And so I think she was obviously murdered. She was in her early 40s, maybe late 30s. She was not an old woman. She was
No.
very healthy.
Yeah.
And her story is just, people need to hear it to take it seriously, that people who do push against the system that is trying to take away your medical freedom, they do put a lot on the line for the movement. You know, they do risk their lives. I've gone through crazy stuff since I've been a researcher that I can't explain. It feels targeted sometimes.
Yeah.
It's part of the territory. It's unfortunate. It's super unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we only have about 10 minutes to go. I would love for you to mention before we shout out your Wednesday night space and
Yeah.
ask for ways to follow up on the work that you're doing, how people keep track of you. I'd love if you could mention just a little bit. I know it's a huge can of worms to even mention towards the end of the program, but just give us a little intro into some of this incredible research you've been doing in terms of the Biden family link to human trafficking, which I saw at the
I
top
can
of
do
your ad.
that. I can do that. I am very attached to the research that I find grassroots, like I did with this Biden story. I'm very attached to it because I do value when I find myself naturally thinking outside of the box. I like to self reward myself for those moments, you know, like where it's just completely not what anyone's talking about, and it's an angle no one looked at, and I congratulate myself when I find these. And the Biden story is one of those. I mean, the story went wild on X. It's got close to 5 million views. It went absolutely viral in ways I could not. Nobody cared about Biden. I didn't think anyone even cares about this family. And I did it because there's something clearly wrong with this family. Um, and so the premise of it is Ashley Biden's diary had come out, right, like a year or two ago. They had found it at a halfway house in Florida. It was confirmed later by Ashley and the administration it was hers because James O'Keefe, a fellow journalist, he had his front door kicked in the middle of the night by FBI agents because the people who had recovered that diary was a woman who was also at the halfway house. She recovered it with her boyfriend, and they took it to James O'Keefe, um, being like, "Hey, this is Ashley, the president's daughter's. There's a lot of stuff in here you should read." And he couldn't confirm it yet, so he didn't run the story, and but he kept it, and the word got around after they tried to track down this diary and find out the woman took it to James. They James is sleeping in boxers, and they kick down his door in the middle of the night, and they revoke the journal from his possession and give him no apology. This was massively disrupting and stressful for him over his job. That's your job as journalists. I am given all sorts of documents all the time to look this over, look this, verify this, and that's part of your job as a journalist. And to have like your like front door like busted in through by FBI in the middle of the night while you're sleeping over your job is just, it's insane. So I was like, what is so important about this diary that they're willing to do this to a journalist, which we're the only career in the world that is protected by the First Amendment. We're specifically protected. There's no other job. John F. Kennedy made that point in 1961 in a speech to the Newspaper Publisher Association that it is the only career that is protected by our Constitution. It is the right for free speech, is the right to disseminate information. Journalism is the only one. So for me, I found it extremely anti-American, and I was like, "What is going on?" And then I read the diary, and I was like, "Oh, I see why they probably wouldn't want this to get out." There's a couple pages in there near the end. It's not very long. She only had it for like less than a year of documentation, I think, in there. And she discusses her childhood, and it's very dark. And she talks about the exact wording, if I remember correctly, was I molested? Question mark. Right. And then she talks about hanging out with her dad, and she goes, and her mom would always say, "You're not my daughter." And she wrote in big caps. And she's like, "You're not my daughter." She's always screaming at me, which is very bizarre. It's obviously her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So what it is very like all these things are very just unsettling. And she said, maybe these showers that I had with my dad growing up were a little too sexual, and it may have led to me being a nymphomaniac and a drug addict, and maybe that's why. And she's like, I remember, you know, sleeping with boys very, very young, and going to my uncle's house, and the things that happened to me and Heather, her cousin. And it's like, so that's her uncle James, which is Joe Biden's brother. So now you've got the father doing inappropriate things. You've got the uncle doing inappropriate things. She talks about hanging out with her brother's friends doing inappropriate things at a very, very young age. We're talking 11 to 13 years old. And and also the same things happening to her cousin. So I went to research her cousin. Like, who is this Heather? Heather Biden is a disaster. She is just like Hunter. She's just like Ashley. And I know a lot about traumas. I've had to deal with a lot of people gone through traumatic experiences at young ages, and you see how the life ends up afterwards. It's not that you're doomed, but if you don't get that necessary help in dealing with that trauma, it does tend to show up in certain ways, like acting erratic, drug behavior, alcohol behavior, over sexualization. These things are common in psychology, for how people tend to deal with these burdens that they had to deal with young that they don't understand. They tend to live them out as adults, completely unaware that that's what's happening to them. And so I saw this, and I see what looks like a string of child abuse people grown up, right? And so I look into, where did these people go to school? It turns out all the Bidens went to the same school. It's Archmere Academy. It's my puppy dog. She's just barking at something. But there's all sorts of different years that they went there. Joe Biden graduated Archmere Academy. It's a Catholic school. It's run by the Diocese of Delaware. It's in Claymont. It's a very small city, a very small Catholic school. And Joe went there. He graduated, I believe, 1960, I believe. Then you've got Hunter and Bo with their 88 and 89, and Ashley graduated in 1998. And every year that one of the Bidens attended school there was an active teacher that was a pedophile, that was raping students.
Wow.
In fact, it was the only years there were pedophiles working there were the years the Bidens attended school, which is very bizarre. And one of them was Reverend Fisher. And there's two reverends during the Biden boys and daughter time period. And then there was rumors of the guy who pretty much started the school back when Biden was in there, who also, like 30 years later, they found he was raping students. And so it's a boarding school. You have to sleep in the quarters with your teachers. Like, they are down the hall. There's a teacher's hall. And then the students have bunks and stuff. And a kid came forward from the same year of Hunter Biden and Bo Biden. They're 1 year apart, but they would have had the same 3 years together in that school. And the Reverend had raped one student named, this is public record. I'm not outing him on rape laws or anything. He testified to this. This is public. And thank goodness he did come forward, because it opened up this door for what happened, I believe, to Bo and Hunter, or at least to Hunter at the very least. Bo would have been older and likely could have been able to protect himself from the man. But Hunter, being much smaller, maybe didn't have such a great chance doing that. And because when you look at the actions of Hunter now and of Ashley now, the family now in general, outside of Bo, but even Bo, there's a really good, suggestion that maybe he did, because Bo spent his entire life following high school. He went directly into going into the field of law. He went to University of Pennsylvania, then he went to not Georgetown, he went to University of Pennsylvania in Syracuse to get his law degree. And what does he do with his law degree? He becomes Attorney General to convict pedophiles for the rest of his life. That's all he did. In fact, he took down the world's worst pedophile. Or not world's worst, our country's worst. Everyone says Jeffrey Epstein. It wasn't Jeffrey. Jeffrey Epstein is peas and carrots compared to this guy, who was a pediatrician who had access to 1,700 children, verified raped over like 300 of them. Horrific guy. And Bo Biden took him down, got him, I think it was 16 consecutive life sentences plus 250 years. I mean, he'll never see the light of day. And we can thank Bo Biden for that. And I think a lot of it had to do with this knowledge of what was happening within his own family. And he, being the oldest of the children, felt this innate need, especially if you're losing his mother when he was only 4, this innate need of protecting his family. And we see that he was very protective of his daughters and his son and his brothers, and so very protective. And they all called Bo their protector. And it's very clear to me that he was either privy to, or even a victim of, or knowledgeable that Hunter was a victim of this this insane these reverends that were raping those students. The student that came forward, Kenneth Whitwell was his name, and he testified to being raped over 300 times by just one of these reverends that was active at the school. And so with that kind of, and I hate to use this language, but insatiable desire, with that kind of need, it was what it shows. Like, this guy can't control himself clearly 300 times in the matter of like 2 years. He raped this boy. That's an insatiable problem. You can't control yourself, clearly. I don't think he would have stopped at just one boy. I don't think so. And the boy bears a very stark resemblance to Hunter when he was young. They both look very similar. Brunette boys, very all-American looking, very tall, lean boys. They look, they could have been brothers. I don't think that the Reverend Fisher, I don't think he stopped with just one. I don't think that's the case. I think that more than likely, and then when Ashley came around, it was a totally different teacher who's a Reverend, and he was caught videotaping the girls in like locker rooms and sexually abusing some of the girls, because they weren't co-ed until the end of the boys being in school there. And then in the late 80s, they changed it to being co-ed, and Ashley gets to go to school there. And she's being abused at home, according to her diary. She's likely being abused at school, and we see what kind of life she's living now. And we can see her trying. And I have a lot of sympathy for these children, because I see them trying. Like Hunter, not as much sympathy, but for Bo and Ashley, these were people that tried to really, they wanted to just make their father happy and proud. But when you're traumatized, those demons come up, and they will actively ruin your life. And I have sympathy for them, but the sad part is that Joe Biden never admonished that school. In fact, he had a meeting there, one of the last meetings he had in his presidency, November of 2024. He held a meeting with the leader of Australia and Japan at Archmere Academy. He asked them to clear out the school for a day, because that school meant so much to him and his family. I thought it was a sick thing for him to say, because I know a student that went to school there who is Roger Stone's lawyer, believe it or not. Roger Stone's lawyer is what's his name? I can't think of it off the top of my head. He's a really super intelligent guy. He also went to school with Hunter at Georgetown, where they both got their law degrees. It's evading me all of a sudden. Nixon. Sure. Nixon is his last name. Mm-hmm. No relation to President Nixon.
Sure.
But he went to the same school, and fortunately they haven't had these problems with the molestation allegations since. But when you look at the fact that Hunter Biden clearly has a lot of deviancy going on, Bo had a lot of great things, and Bo died so young. And it's very peculiar, because he was trying child traffickers, one of them being the heir of DuPont Chemicals. He convicted him for raping his own 3-year-old daughter. Horrific. And that was the last case that Bo Biden had before he suddenly died at the young age of 46 from a glioblastoma. And glioblastomas, there's only 130,000 cases globally around the world every year. So it's a very rare cancer. It's one of the rarest ones. In terms of death, especially in this country, we don't see them till late 60s. The average death of a glioblastoma is about 62 to 64 years old. Bo was still under 50. It's very unusual he died of it so quickly and so young. And that gets me back to Dr. Judah Ferry Baker and her knowledge of weaponized cancers. And we have, there's questions there, they said it was blamed on his time in the Middle East, and he was a National Guardsman, and he was exposed to chemicals. But nobody, I looked into his whole platoon. None of them, some died, but none of them died from cancers. None of them died from fast-acting. None of them. He was the only one. And as the captain of his group, he wouldn't have been in the darkest parts anyways. He was the leader. He would be more protected than the rest of the platoon, as you would just in military operations. You don't want your captain to die first, because then who's directing you guys to do the right things? So he would have been protected. And we're just, the worst thing is that Jill Biden, and I don't trust that woman. I don't trust her more than I don't trust Joe. I trust Jill less. She's on the board for a company starting in 2017 called Save the Children, which is international. Most people have heard of it. Seems like a good company. But under her tenure, she took trips starting when Obama was president with Joe to Guatemala, setting up all these youth and women's center kind of things that were funded by USAID. and collaborated with Save the Children. And then just a couple of years ago, while Biden was president, the president of Guatemala had written the United States and put out a press release saying we are going to kick Save the Children out of our country because they raided them in the middle of the night because of they had evidence that the people of Save the Children, which is Jill Biden's, she's on the board for it, were raping and trafficking children through their offices.
Wow.
And they shut down, I think, 3 of their headquarters that they had in Guatemala over child trafficking and child abuse. And it wasn't just child abuse, sexual child abuse. These kids were being raped and molested. And when asked for a quote, from the company, Save the Children, because Jill is first lady, they refuse to answer any questions. They shut the whole conversation down. They say, we can't talk about it. And then you look at the fact that the largest immigration of children into this country has been Joe Biden's time. And his wife is on the board for this company. And when you look at percentages, people think it's in America, we think it's Mexicans coming across the border, which is not accurate. Mm-hmm. It is less, I think it's under 20% Mexican descendants that are coming across. They're primarily from 2 countries, Guatemala, where Save the Children's having these sex trafficking problems, and El Salvador. Those are where a majority, I think it's over 60% of the kids and people are coming from, those 2 countries. It's not Mexico. People are giving Mexico really bad, this is Mexico, we need to make them put up the border. It's not even their people crossing.
Right.
It's largely the Guatemalans and then El Salvadorians. And for the children, the ratio for children, according to Ryan Matta, and I do trust his reporting on this, he's actually been to Guatemala, has talked to the prime minister personally 3 times in the last 2 years. He's an incredible journalist who's really doing the hardest work. And he said that it's 60 to 80% of the children that have crossed of the 350,000 missing, 60 to 80% of them are Guatemalan children. Now, what are the odds that you get they're getting shut down there for child trafficking, and yet we're still seeing the president, whose wife is on the board for this company, all the kids are still coming from that. They're still getting access to these Guatemalan children.
Yeah.
And they're ceaseless. And we haven't heard anything. Ryan is the number one person to keep up on this story. He knows it so much better than I. I just assisted him in a lot of this research. But why is it that we have, and it's not the first time this has happened with the trafficking of Guatemalan children, but this is the first time a presidential cabinet has clearly been behind it.
Wow.
And, I don't think we'll ever know the extent of horrors that this family has done, but I pray for the Guatemalan children. It's horrific to think that a president and his wife have an agenda to harm these children, or to allow the harm of them at their benefit. It's just
terrible.
It's beyond terrible.
Yeah, beyond terrible indeed. Just disgusting. So we're out of time, unfortunately. I think we're over time, but it's okay because this is a pre-recorded episode. So
it's okay. I hear my puppy getting all fussy with me.
Okay, so really quick, in 1 minute, please invite people to your awesome Wednesday night spaces with Mike Mack. I've enjoyed those spaces very much. You kind of have a nice blend of interesting, socially relevant conversation along with sort of a fun sort of atmosphere. It's like 1 part fun, 1 part serious, but you guys have a really great thing going. So could you please invite people to those spaces and tell people how they can follow you?
So tonight on X and every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time or 3 p.m. Pacific, we have a show that we run. We allow up 10 different speakers onto our panel. This week, we're going to be discussing the Signal Gate scandal that happened recently with our national security advisor. And we're going to be discussing that. And is foreign influence too much in America? And we just have a good time. It's called Say Something because we want you to come up. We want you to say something. We've never been a censoring type. We want people to put their honest opinions out there and have a discussion with not just fellow Americans, but we have an international crowd. So with your fellow man, and we'll have a good, honest conversation, have a good time. So yes, on X, Destiny Rezendez is my handle on there, or X Mike Mac, and grab a mic, come and say something. 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. I would love it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is going to air on Friday, but next
week,
and every Wednesday after that, join them. It's really a fun conversation. And
we've been doing it 2 years almost. It's been a good ride.
Yeah, it's awesome. You guys have a great chemistry. I enjoy the program very much. So thank you so much, Destiny. It's really great catching up with you.
Likewise,
Yeah,
Jeremiah.
yeah, keep up all this great work that you're doing, and yeah, can't wait to talk to you soon.
Likewise.
Have a great day.
Peace out.
Peace.
When you walk with open arms towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know the truth, and the truth is love, yes it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learn from a book or from the news. It's not like that, 'cause it's a thing. It is something that you do. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dib on baby did long. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dib on baby did love's the highest truth. Nothing could be higher than love, my friend. Love's the deepest truth. Nothing could be deeper than love, my friend. When you stop and you take the time just to think about your life, you'll recall the ones you love and the ones who were always there for you. Better thank those friends better. You better make amends. Go and tell them now, yeah, yeah. Tell them what they mean to you. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dear bone baby did love. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dear bone baby